welcome to the film. This is going to try and be a preparation guide of sorts, a pseudo-ethnography to life. And I'm going to ask some questions like, why are things that are different shocking? Why do we feel out of place in a new space? And what is the impact of our personal context on our experience of culture shock? And what do we need to do to avoid that experience? And should we feel like we should avoid that experience? Is culture shock the method by which we learn a lot more about a new space and place? These are the sort of framing questions for this short investigation into the dimensions of culture shock. Mark Twain said of India, "It is the cradle of human race, the birthplace of human speech, the mother of history, the grandmother of legend, and the great-grandmother of tradition. Our most valuable and most restrictive materials in history are treasured all up in India only." I do not want to think of culture shock as a malady, but as an indicator to us, as travellers, that we should not be making wherever we are like home, but rather that we should embrace our surroundings more fully, not shy away, not attempt to recalibrate a sense of normalcy, because normalcy is such a context-based concept that wherever we previously were, whatever was previously normal to us, is now lost in the experiences we've since had since we've left that place. We are the sum total of our experiences, of course, and challenging our new surroundings through the filter of our experiences must be regarded and recognized as the enabler of culture shock. This might suggest that culture shock is inevitable. Perhaps it is, but it should not be avoided or ignored. If we feel the bite of culture shock, that is good, because it means we are insecure, and if we are that, we are uncomfortable, and if we are that, we are challenged, and if we are that, we learn. Reflecting on the process of culture shock more broadly, I see linkages with the concept of development. The history of development could well be described as a global-scale Western response of culture shock. Instead of embracing new surroundings, the West invented colonization, and when that became unfashionable, the piety of imperialism became the might of globalization. When President Truman declared in 1949 that there was a universal aspiration for change and betterment, which he labeled development, he told the death knell to any hope of global equality. Development is not about noticing deficiencies and paying to fix them. This method is arrogant, conservative, ignorant, wrong, and pervasive. It is a word that has too much stigma and too much bad history. It is now a negative word, and it is an oxymoron in and of itself, and it does not meet its aspirational etymology. I cannot presume to find a replacement for the word, so instead I will look into the process we each experience when we arrive in a new place, universally referred to as culture shock. I take the view that this feeling of listlessness associated with culture shock is the cause for Mr. Truman's misdiagnosis of development as a problem. That is to say, when we arrive in a new place, we sooner notice the differences between our new surroundings and those of our familiar, and label them as problems or abnormalities. Something we can each do to avoid sounding like a 20th century politician is to limit our ethnographic centrism. Don't be shocked at overt poverty next to imperial heritage, or apparent idleness. Don't be surprised at open urinals or terrible roads underneath shining new metro stations, or the predominance of men and the conspicuous absence of women. Simply understand that this is a different space. Things are not bad, scary, rude, dirty, or wrong, because this is India. Things may be perceived as described by these adjectives because we are materially and terminally afraid of the other. We do not trust anything but what is familiar and comfortable. We must. That is the key to overcome our insecurity of culture shock. Be aware that our norm is not the norm, and that your manner, my manner, is subjective, not prescriptive. While just talking about non-prescriptive normalcy, I'll take this little bit to talk about this incident where our taxi driver was pulled over. Just an interesting insight into police and citizen relations in Delhi.
Just at the moment, our tuk-tuk driver has been pulled off the road and we don't know what's going on. So what seems to be the problem is that our driver wasn't wearing his uniform and I can't film.
Two things while on placement you can do absolutely nothing about are the people you're with and the food. Embrace the other participants until they are family. This is for sanity reasons mostly. And take on the food head on, because as we'll see, it is part of the experience of processing culture shock.
So when you arrive in India, the first thing that you should want to do is literally go for a walk. Walk around your accommodation, find out where the supermarket is, find out where the local markets are, and don't get confused between what is a market, what is a mall, what is a supermarket. To be honest, they're all the same thing. If you come with me, I'll show you where a good place to eat is. It's where all the local tuk-tuk drivers are having their lunch. So just come with me and have a look. Before you come to India, people will try to give you all sorts of advice. People who have been to India, their advice is generally useful, but you simply will not know until you know when you arrive. They will tell you how many mosquito patches to take, whether to take a sleeping bag or not, whether to eat the street food or not, how many injections to get. Speak to the professionals about the injections and that sort of thing. But the sleeping bag and the insect repellent and all that sort of stuff, you can all get that here. It is so much more exciting to arrive in a place, not unprepared, but prepared to discover what you need when you need it.
What I'm trying to say is that we should use this opportunity of living in a new city to discover how it works, where to do shopping, and then think about the reasons that explain why grocery shopping is different according to place and space.
On the street food, I've been having it and it is delicious. It is cheaper and it is so much more real than anything else.
Just come with me now to have a look at some street food and you'll see what it's like.
So this is a street vendor, which is just around the corner from where we're working at Restless Development. And this is a chickpea type dish with some roti, and it's called chole gote. Never had it before, but clearly it's where the locals go. And so this is going to be the first try. So what you do, you spread it on top. You rip it off a bit. Wrap it up. It's really good. We've been ordering in food. Western food is about 500 to 600 rupees per person. Indian food is 50 to 100 rupees per person. Clearly it's much better price-wise, but to be honest, it actually also tastes much better.
Food is one of the greatest unifiers of culture across the world. Dr. Jennifer Berg, Director of Graduate Food Studies at the University of New York, draws attention to the importance of food for post-diaspora cultures. In these cases, food is typically the last identifier of culture which is abandoned. Of course, this takes several generations, but I wonder if we, as travellers, experience a sort of hyper-intensified version of the same. I mean, who didn't crave a Subway or a salad or a steak? Whether we turn to our own means and methods of cooking, or seek out more familiar food in style or taste, or simply voice our desire for normal food, we can clearly see the process of culture shock at play.
But it's just a fascinating place. Over here, there's a bloke eating what looks like nachos with his mum. And if you listen to the music, it's just a fascinating mix of Western, and then earlier on it was playing some Hindi music. Just the way things are built. The air conditioning in here is freezing. So just a few observations which make this totally stand out from across the street that we just drove past, where there are slums.
I've tried to show a summary of the process of culture shock in this film, but I also wanted to get some words from some of the family who experienced all of this with me. I asked them to describe their time in India. I'll leave it to you to interpret the meaning.
Really didn't know what I was expecting. Curry.
So words, yeah?
Curry.
Crazy dishes.
Excitement. Curry. Fascinating.
Eye-opening.
Disappointment. Exhausting. Fabulous. Hate. So much hate. Yeah. Fantastical.
What else?
India.
One must also be aware that culture shock manifests itself in a horrible, gut-wrenching sort of a way. But we must also keep perspective. It is part of a process. It is often not until we have finished a task, or a placement in this case, that we get this perspective. I do feel that you can truly see why this experience of culture shock, however it occurs, benefits you post-fact, even though parts of the experience were not enjoyable along the way. That lack of enjoyment, and equally the fact of enjoyment in different places, is part of this process. I don't think I'm doing a great job of explaining it, but to recognize that it is a process is key to truly experiencing this. To be honest, I'd really rather not use the term culture shock, because I think it is a vague concept. We respond to circumstance. On this placement, you get thrown in to living with a new group of people who you met once or twice before. And the impact of that on yourself and others is very simply that your habits or your idiosyncrasies manifest at a much larger scale, a much higher level of intensity. And that, in itself, is an expression of culture shock. You won't recognize it until either somebody points it out to you because you're being annoying, or you think about it afterwards. It's not a bad thing. It's just an interesting response. That is an internalized response. It's sort of in a safe space because your apartment is the most familiar thing that you experience in India. You try to make it your own. But I think that the proper technique would be to not make your experience of this placement your own. Outside. Don't try to find Subway, don't try to find Domino's or a salad. It's not because you shouldn't. Do that later, but in the first couple of weeks, go out and buy Indian clothes and wear them to work. Go and try the street food, and don't worry about whether it's been cooked in the right water or whatever. I think if you embrace the space that you're occupying and the things that locals do, it will have a much more useful impact on your appreciation and understanding of how people live in a different environment.